fellas, we ready to have some fun time?
Let's do it.
All right, Ty, you ready?
Let's go.
All right. Timeout. Tyler, who we taking a timeout with today?
Well, thank you, Kevin. And today, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, we have Tom O'Connor, president at Sigl Community of Agencies. Tom, thanks for being on the show. Kevin and I are fired up to have you. We all know what Sigl is in Rochester. And Kevin and I want to know, first question, where's your favorite spot to eat, Tom? We don't care about presidents, CEOs. We care about food. Where are you taking Kevin and I out to eat if we're going out to eat this afternoon?
All right, if we were going out to eat this afternoon, we'd probably have to go get ourselves a garbage plate. That would be the first thing, right? Now, I used to like the place that was down on the bay that they just knocked down for a park. So we're going to have to find a new waterfront place to go. That would be my take, right? Because this time of year, you got to be on the water. So we're going to someplace you can either boat up to, take a jet ski to, or ride the motorcycle up to. But we're going to go someplace with some water and some views.
That I can get behind. I mean, after a decade, it feels like, of no sun here in Rochester.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, the long COVID season, right?
All right. Well, we're on my boat. It's called the Dirty Oar, Tom, and you asked me to play your favorite song on repeat. What song are we listening to while we're pulling up for those garbage plates?
All right. Well, it's on my ringtone, and most people who know me know this. Everlong, Foo Fighters.
Right. Wow, and it makes the ringtone. Wow.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, all right, Everlong, love some Foo, man. I love me some 90s for sure. I'm a 90s guy, you know.
Yeah.
The era, it will never get old. I think the kids think it's boring nowadays, you know, when you like play it, they're like Alice in Chains is like, let's get to like the beat. You're like, this is the beat. You know?
That's right.
But I love it.
But it's a real beat. It's a drummer who actually knows how to play. You know, what a concept.
Exactly. It's fun going back to the 90s, especially being like, will these songs make it today? And in my head, I'm like, of course they would.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But Tom, I wanted to ask you, man. I don't care if you play golf or not. Kevin and I are huge golfers, but if we're all going to play a threesome today, and we're scrambling versus another threesome, who are we playing against?
Oh,
Aaron
Rodgers, Josh Allen, and Patrick Mahomes, right? I don't want Brady anywhere near us. That guy's got enough going on.
I only caught a bit of that. It was quite the I don't know who planned it for a Wednesday, but I don't know how hot of a day that would be for everybody to watch that. But I guess it's because the tournament started today for the regular PGA. But they looked human. That was the best part of not watching PGA Tour golfers. I saw them actually make some mistakes, which was great to see.
Well, I didn't see it all live, but I heard about it today at lunch, and a couple of people were like, you know, Aaron Rodgers looks like he could actually play on the PGA Tour. And, you know, it's the same thing. Isn't that enough? Like, you're already world-class quarterback, and you can also be a PGA level golfer. Come on, man.
And Jeopardy, guys. He killed Jeopardy too. It's like enough, man.
Yeah. Aaron, we get it. You're amazing. Yeah.
Right.
How many different ways? Well, Tom, the other favorite thing that we like to ask too is because I think you get to learn a lot about people from some of the movies that they choose to watch. One of mine being Remember the Titans has always been one of my favorites. What is your all-time favorite movie and why?
Oh, all-time favorite movie. That's hard. But that's really hard because there's so many different styles and I love Shawshank Redemption.
Oof.
You know,
if you got 7 hours, you can watch it on public TV, right?
Yeah, right. But you know, and then Pulp Fiction was a phenomenal movie. I mean, and then you know, I grew up in the '80s, so I like some John Hughes movies as well. So I mean, that's a tough question. And then right now you've got Maverick in theaters, which was the Top Gun reboot, right? I haven't seen it yet, but you know, that was a fun movie when I was in college. So. Yeah,
I just watched Ice and Iceman and Goose, and I just watched it on Netflix because it was like,
okay,
like, oh shit, I haven't seen this movie in forever. I'm going to throw this on. Tom Cruise looks young and handsome.
Oh my God, the guy doesn't age. He's also
doesn't age.
He's not going to. I don't think he's going to age because he's not big enough to age.
Yeah,
you know, he's only 5'5". You know, so the package is just going to stay the same. You know. That's my take on it, right? You know,
God, I hope you're right.
We've got a lot more weight to carry around. You know, we're bigger frame, things get sore. But he, you know, he's 59 and he's 5'5". It is what it is. you know?
It is what it is. Yeah, he's got no wrinkles. The guy does not age.
No,
Maybe it's from eating
no.
that placenta all those years ago. So I want to jump in, Tom, because I know you. I'm a member of El Sigl myself, and have been a member of the committee for quite some time for the sports. But I want to learn and kind of turn the dial back, if you will, and walk Tyler and I through that first day that maybe you got that president's role there at El Sigl. Who did you call? Who was the first person you reached out to? And how the heck did you find your way at El Sigl?
Okay, so let me go back a little bit further than that for you first, because the easier way would be I also started as a volunteer on the sports committee.
Wow.
So you and I have that same experience.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
I am, yeah, I am. I was a volunteer on the sports committee representing Gannett newspapers. I was with Gannett newspapers for 16 years before I came to El Sigl. I was on the sports committee, and I was attending a meeting of the sports committee, and Dan Myers, my predecessor, announced that he said, today's a little bit of a bittersweet day. Our marketing director just gave notice, so we're going to be looking for a VP of marketing. And at the time, I was the marketing director for the Democrat and Chronicle here in Rochester. And I walked out in the parking lot with Dan because I knew Dan was one of those one-of-a-kind nonprofit leaders, very well respected in the industry. And I just thought, boy, this is an interesting opportunity. Let me go out and have a chat with him. And Dan said, Tom, what are you thinking? You've got this great career with Gannett newspapers. You've got a young family. What would make you think that you want to come to work here? And I said, well, there's the work-life balance thing. That's a huge thing. B, I was in an industry that was changing dramatically, and didn't necessarily feel as comfortable with some of the direction. They were still figuring out where they were going. And I loved my first 12 years at Gannett, but I was there 16. And the last 4 were very different than the first 12. And so watching that industry change and its response to it, how they were trying to handle the digital environment, it was an adjustment. And so, it was appealing to me to go to work for a place that had an impact, that had a different kind of work-life balance. I had spent a lot of time traveling and didn't, anybody who's been in an airport in the last decade knows that there's nothing illustrious or fun about air travel anymore, right? Like it used to be, oh, you get dressed up and you feel like you're somebody important, and now you're just, they're herding you right onto the planes, maybe if they've got one. And it's just different. So I said, okay, I'm getting out of this. So I walked with Dan. We talked about the opportunity. He said, what we need is somebody who can basically serve as an ad agency for these agencies. They're independent. They all operate on their own budgets, their own leadership, but they do need creative help, websites, marketing, annual appeals, fundraising, all of that. And I just thought it was a great opportunity. So I jumped in. That was 2008. Now, here's the funny part of this from a financial standpoint. I joined in end of June, beginning of July of 2008. And the market went, that's when the whole world fell apart, was that fall. So here I come to work for a nonprofit, and we're on the world, right? And I think somebody used the term, the economy is cratering, and I'm working for a nonprofit who's saying, boy, are we going to go down to like a 4-day work week, or how are we going to navigate this? So here I went from a for-profit, company that had its challenges, frankly, but it was still, it's still charting a course, to a nonprofit that was really struggling with the impact of the economic crisis in 2008. And that was the housing bubble burst and the whole thing. So the good news is that we had a plan, we had a secondary plan, we worked through that plan and obviously emerged from it, but that was the start. So, I tell people the adjustment from a nonprofit to a for-profit and vice versa is really about the resources to start with. And that's not even, adjustable based on what's happening around you.
Nice, Tom. Well, that's an interesting start. It seems like you quit the newspaper right as the iPhone came out, man. So it was a good time right there, dude. Because we all know I used to sling newspapers down in Arkansas, and I remember when the iPhone came out and the kids were like, "What's a newspaper? And what's a magazine?"
Right.
I think that was right at 2009, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, Tyler, for what it's worth, we were all carrying Blackberries, and we thought we were the bomb. So,
You remember the Palm Pilots? Those were even before.
I do.
BlackBerry.
Yes. I had one. I couldn't get it to do anything for me.
No,
you know?
did nothing, but it looked cool as hell.
Right. Oh, let me check my calendar. You flip open this monochrome screen, right?
So, Tom, I got to ask you, looking back from where you are now, a president of a nonprofit, I think Kevin and I are close to being one of those someday. We're getting closer and closer as the days go. And I still don't know how, right? How do you make the transition, or how do you get into being, do you have to be in a company as like a VP of operations and then be a hoisted, or how do you apply to be a president of a nonprofit or a company in general?
Sure. That's a great question, Tyler. And I didn't completely answer you in my response. So let me further that a little bit. So I took over as the VP of marketing, and then about maybe 3 to 4 years into that, we had an operations vice president position created or become available, and I jumped into that. So that then gave me really the launching pad to understand the better aspects of the business, because the marketing part, you're certainly involved in the fundraising. I was aware of the foundation. I was involved in kind of storytelling. But when I got into the operations side, that's when I really started to understand the management of the facilities, the real estate portion of our business, which is a big portion of the portfolio. And I got more exposure to some of the investment committees and some of the other things that we have going on. And I got a better sense of the number of committees and folks that were around the table, the connections within the community. So that helped. And then, so I was the VP of operations until 2016, and Dan Myers had announced his retirement. And they did a national search, and initially, in full disclosure, I didn't put my hand up. There was a search committee formed. They started the work. They hired a recruiter. They were engaged in that work, and I interviewed initially with a recruiter just as a staff member, and was asked if I was interested, and I said not really. Dan Myers was a legend. I didn't really want to follow a legend. I'd seen some other nonprofit executives do that without a lot of success in this community. And Dan is a one-of-a-kind kind of guy. So I was like, boy, you don't step into that if you don't have to. And then the reality set forth was I saw the job description, and I heard the search committee chair announce in a board meeting that they were not looking for the next Dan Myers. They were looking for the next leader of Sigl. And here were some of the skill sets that they felt they needed. Here were the things that they desired for the position. And as I read the job description, I started to realize that there were a number of initiatives that I felt personally responsible to and for. And I started to realize that I'm pretty competitive, although I don't have to win. I hate to lose. But I realized that I was looking at this job description and I was saying, hey, wait a minute. A lot of these things are things that I've been responsible for, and I want to see them nurtured and grow and thrive. And I started to realize, well, wait a minute. Do you want to do that under somebody else's leadership, or are you ready? So I did. I had a number of conversations with some of my mentors, folks that I've gotten good feedback from, and said, hey, what do you think? And almost to a person, everybody said, it's time. You know the organization, the politics of it, if you will. And I don't think we're all that political, but you understand the structure, and it's a complex structure. And you've been doing a lot of the work inside. And then the benefit I always had was Dan Myers was me. He's a friend, a great friend. And I knew if I needed him at any point in time, he was a phone call away. And that's somebody who'd been here for 30 years. So when you can tap into that, that's really helpful. And then the other part of it, guys, for me, I was very fortunate. I have a team that I assembled around me, but 2 or 3 of those members have been with this organization for over a decade. And in some cases, we've got folks that have been here for 3 and 4 decades. So when you have that kind of institutional knowledge around you as well, we've got a guy on our team who says, it's not what you know, it's what you don't know, right? But in this case, we've got some folks who've been here and seen it and could say, hey, we stepped on that landmine 15 years ago, and maybe you shouldn't. And so I'm smart enough to follow advice,
and ask questions and listen. It sounds like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, listening's huge, right?
It is. And I think you touched on something else that's really important, is that bi-directional mentorship. I think having, obviously, the gentleman that you keep referring to, and it is well known in Rochester, just having him in your back pocket to run by any questions, any scenarios, situations, how he would have potentially handled it. I think sometimes having that is unfortunately in a lot of organizations, succession planning is not a priority. So they don't have that opportunity to pass that institutional knowledge to that next person, especially given today. One of the things I wanted to go back to is that you talked about is that you assumed a role during potentially the most recent economic downturn, similar to what we experienced during the pandemic. Catastrophic in some cases. I'm sure Al Sigl wasn't even sure if they would have their doors open tomorrow, even during the pandemic at times, right? What did you learn in those initial days within 2008 that better prepared you as a leader for what happened over 2.5 years ago now?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. The first thing was the ideas were multiple, and we didn't lock into one direction completely. We said, let's be flexible here, and let's have a couple of different scenarios that we're gonna try to go in the event of, right? So here's plan A, and then it may not be linear. We may have to jump to D, but let's at least have a plan for what we're gonna do. And going back to 2008, but certainly during the pandemic as well, that became a question of staffing. That became a question of who's going to be where, are the doors going to be open, what days are they going to be open, what kinds of things we're going to need to do to be safe, be generating revenue, being stewards of funds that people have given us and we're responsible for. So there's a lot of variables that come into play, but certainly 2008 I think gave us a framework to think about and not move so quickly or be indecisive. You do have to make a decision. But then at that point it became let's be smart about the direction if we can. But the pandemic was interesting because to my knowledge, no one around me or around this team had ever experienced anything like that. We've seen economic downturns, there's been recessions, inflationary pressures, all of that, but a pandemic was different. And the extent that it still continues on in some ways is just remarkable. So I think, what I've learned here particularly, and I think one of the really gorgeous things about Al Sigl is it's a collaborative, and we have, I have access to other executive leadership, from all of the other agencies here, and we are collaborative. We're not competitive. We really look at it in terms of, what kinds of things can we do together. It's part of our mission to be, achieving more together. But to have a monthly meeting with the executive leadership of all these agencies and say, what do we need to do to be responsive, especially at the onset of the pandemic, when we were being mandated that, you could have only 25% of your workforce on site and things like that. How do you manage that and keep folks gainfully employed throughout? So those were the problems that we were trying to solve. But it was really helpful to be able to lean on each other and say, hey, we're thinking about doing it this way. And then, be able to debate a little bit in a healthy way, is that really the best direction? So we were learning as we were going. Somebody, I've heard that phrase many times, right? You're flying the airplane as you're building it. We were definitely flying as we were building.
Might as well start moving and then figure it out rather than sitting there and twisting your wheels, in your head is what I hate. I like to err on the side of action. It doesn't always work out right. Yeah, but right. That's I'm your Huckleberry kind of guy. I like to do my best Doc Holliday impression and shoot from the hip quite often.
Yeah.
And Tom, we have a bunch of listeners down here in Texas now where I am, and I keep asking them for feedback, and they're like, dude, we CEOs and presidents about their company, and I'm like, yeah, okay, because when I was up in the 585, everyone knew what the Al Sigl was. Well, you I'm trying to toss you a high and tight fastball here so you can knock over the green monster. Can you just kind of on a high level let us know what Al Sigl's about?
Sure. So in a simplest way, Al Sigl is a nonprofit. We're a collection of human service special needs. And Al Sigl is the real estate provider for it. We're a nonprofit real estate company. We provide spaces that are uniquely designed for these agencies below market rate. That's one of the benefits of being a nonprofit. And in addition to that, because somebody will say, oh, okay, if I'm from Texas, I'm going to call you a landlord, right? But we're a little different because we have a foundation, and our foundation gives philanthropic support back to our member agencies. So that's different than most real estate companies. You certainly aren't going to find a landlord who says, hey, you know what I was thinking? I was going to give you back something this year. That's what we do. And that's what really differentiates us from any other kind of real estate company. The model in and of itself would be innovative. When you add the component of philanthropic support, that takes it over the top. And I don't know, Tyler, where you are in Texas, but there's an example down there. It's a social purpose real estate called Serve Denton. It's in Denton, Texas, and it's Pat Smith is the executive director. And now I know I'm supposed to be talking about Al Sigl, but I'm part of a national nonprofit centers network, and Pat and I are colleagues. And I know he's just launched what looks like Al Sigl in Texas in the last 3 or 4 years.
It's 15 minutes north of me. Tom, right? Denton is, I'm down here between Fort Worth and Denton. Okay, Pat Smith, huh?
Pat Smith, he's an awesome guy. He actually lived in Rochester or Fairport for a little bit. Look him up, tell him I sent you, you'll love him. And
that's
guys, you're gonna have to get him on. You're gonna take your show from the south to the northeast with him.
Dude, there we go, Tom. And dude, that's awesome. So are you and Bob Russell boys over there?
Oh, absolutely.
I'm understanding how all this works now. We had Bob on the show a while back talking hockey and how he likes to mop the floors and whatnot, literally.
Yeah.
So sweet. Okay, well, I will reach out to Pat Smith for sure. What a small world, Tom.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, and Bob Russell is he's the CEO of Hearing and Speech, as you guys know, and that's one of the Al Sigl member agencies, one of the founding members. And this collaboration came together in 1962. And we first opened in 1968 with our first building. So I tell people there was a lot of planning that went into this before it actually became a real thing.
And it's something that I've been a part of for quite some time now, because I just love the work that we do and how many organizations that we get to support here in the community. And Tom, something that you had said during the pandemic that really stuck with me was that the needs of the community really didn't go away during the pandemic, right? So the community still, the people that needed those types of services were still there. They didn't just wistfully go away and could stay at home and still receive those types of services. So that really spoke to me. I think we get comfortable, and something that you're more comfortable or familiar with is change. You mentioned how back in the day that when you were working for Gannett for the first 12 years, it was bliss, right? But the last 4 years started to change. What during that experience has helped you to better navigate change and develop trust across your current staff that you have there today at Al Sigl?
Sure. So I think what was happening with Gannett in terms of managing change is that there just wasn't clear direction from the top, and it wasn't that they didn't want to provide it. It was just so much uncertainty in the model. So, and I think all of us, you can sense authenticity, right? And I think, a number of people just were questioning the authenticity of the direction and whether or not it was really tested, researched, believed in. So I think, the way it applies here and the way I look at it in terms of this organization is we're not a global company. We're not a global industry. We have a pretty good handle on what's happening in our community. And we get great feedback from our agencies that tell us, these are the things that we need to respond to. I think, when you hear directly from clients and you hear directly from families who are receiving services from these member agencies, and they are the ones who provide the direct care services. We provide the buildings and spaces for them to do it in. But when you hear these stories and you realize how profoundly impactful the work is, and waiting lists, there's waiting lists for housing, there's waiting lists for services, there's waiting lists for, I'll give you an example. During the pandemic, just prior to the pandemic, but during it, we opened a partnership with the University of Rochester Medical Center. It's a pediatric behavioral health and wellness program. And this is for, young adults, teenagers who are having mental health issues up to and including trying to be successful in committing suicide. And there was a waiting list as we were building this project. And the reality is, I met recently with the director of the program and we were talking about it. And he said, Tom, we still have a waiting list. But if we hadn't built this, we would be overwhelmed right now with what's going on, because it's gotten so much more desperate and there's been so many more incidences because of the pandemic and the isolation that people feel and felt. It's, I say to people, and I think, Kevin, you've heard me say this as your chair of the sports committee, I wish we had never used the term social distancing. I know there was somebody way smarter than me that coined that phrase and put it out there, but we should have been talking physical distancing. Social distancing is not acceptable. We are, as humans, we need to socialize. We need to be together with people. We need to be able to give each other hugs. And yes, physical distancing kept us away from that. But I think that's one of the key elements of what we've learned in the pandemic is you have to be able to lean on people. We have to work together. You cannot isolate or do these things in a silo, especially when things are tough.
Yeah. And I love how you use it as an opportunity to really collaborate with the other executives and the other leaders, because people still have more questions than answers when it comes to some of the challenges that businesses and organizations alike are facing today. I appreciate you sharing that added insight and context. And I think, Tyler, what did you have next?
Dude, I love the social distancing. Yeah, what a gloom, that's a glum lot right there, if you ask me. I don't think you can ever social distance me, man. That word bubble doesn't work very well, man. I met Kevin over Zoom, and I remember I hung up on him. I was like, that guy's like my best friend, over a Zoom. But
right. And then let me tell you, Tyler, if you haven't met in person yet, he's a handsome devil in person. Three-dimensionally, he's all there,
We have actually shook hands a couple of times, but yeah, it was amazing what types of connections that you could still build even in a digital world. But I love what you're saying about the social side of it. I mean, I think when we're starting to see some of the repercussions of that isolation, like you mentioned, but also some of the beauty in it. I think mental health was something that we never really talked about openly. And I think you just talked about it from a pediatric side, but now we're talking about it in the workforce. And I think smart organizations and smart leaders are starting to tune into that and understand that wellness is not just physical wellness anymore, where we just had to protect the physical well-being of our employees while they were in the walls of our business. How are you building and establishing trust? Because I'm sure, right, during a pandemic, you're being a nonprofit, you start to hear about grants, you see all the money going out the door from the federal government, not sure if your grants might still continue to be there to support you. How did you, rally the troops? How did you bring everybody under your roof to make sure that, hey, we don't know what's coming, but I want to be the calm of the storm, basically?
Yeah. I think that's ongoing work. I really do. My take on how you build trust is as much transparency as possible. No hidden agendas, and admit what you don't know, right? Because I think people can call, they can say, hey, you know what, I ain't buying that. But if you say, listen, I'm uncertain, I'm not sure, this is uncharted territory for me or for all of us, but this is the direction that we think makes the most sense and why. And then the other part of it in terms of communication is be open to different ideas, right? Because somebody may say, hey, have we thought about this instead? And I think that's, when you show people that they're empowered to offer creative solutions, when you say to people, hey, I want your voice at the table with mine, and I respect your opinion, I think that's how you start to build trust. And then I think more importantly, on top of that is the follow through, right? If you say, this is what we're going to do, and I'll use donors as an example. If we say to donors, look, we've got a project and we need to make this happen. We need your support. They need to be updated on your progress, and then they need to see the final outcome of that, right? They need to see that, hey, we did exactly what we said we were going to do with your investment. And I think that's important that people understand that, these are ways that we are good shepherds and stewards of funds, and that we tell people that we're going to follow through and do what we said we were going to do.
Err on the side of action, Tyler.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, I love it, Tom. Matter of fact, I've had some epiphanies lately. Growing up in the 90s, it's like, first impressions are all that matters. I'm like, dude, where are you on your 181st impression?
Nice.
Where is that? That's what I've learned as erring on action, right? Everyone can talk a good talk. I know I can, on a first presentation, knock that thing right out of the park, and to call it a day is not how it really works, So if I ever had to write a book, it'd probably be called the 181st Impression. Tom, if you ever wrote a book, what would it be titled?
Still figuring it out.
Work in progress. No.
Yeah. I'm constantly curious. But I got to be honest, I mean, if you think about, right, just think about like technology and how much that's changed just in the last few years, right? Like I'm blown away by medicine advances, by the things that, like my kids are so freaking smart. It scares me, I can't do their homework. I can tell you that. And yet, when you think about like what's going to happen with artificial intelligence, what's going to happen with, with machine learning and the way we do work, when you talk about labor shortages and people saying, look, we've got to be creative and find new ways. I'm all about, all right, let's figure that one out. Right. I don't dismiss the fact that not everybody wants to be a waitress or a waiter or, bus tables or work in construction or what have you. But we've got to figure out ways to get these things done because there's a demand for it. So if it requires us to think differently about technology and how to utilize it, I think people just have to be accepting of the fact that, it might look different and it may be very different experience, but if it delivers for you what you were expecting, then isn't that a good thing? And that's how I'm looking at what we're doing here in the nonprofits. I'm looking at it saying, hey, maybe, and we've got executives who are working together on this, but maybe technology comes into play in ways that we've never used it before. But if you can ask Alexa what the weather is, or if she can play your favorite song, I think she ought to be able to monitor the health of the person that she's in the room with, right? So we've got to figure out ways to harness that type of technology if we can't find the labor to do it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and that's a serious concern when we hear about 1.8 jobs available to qualified candidates. We just don't have the people anymore. We lost a significant amount of the 55 years and older during the pandemic. They cashed in on their homes, they cashed in on years of intellectual capital themselves, and even social capital. So it's really an interesting time, but nothing should be off the table. And I love your points about AI and machine learning as what ifs, right? If we have such an abundant need, always being curious is kind of one of those leadership qualities that Tyler will tell you and attest to, is that we hear about it on our show quite often. I think that curiosity helps us to ask that if, why, when, how, where, what will happen, instead of being really focused on, I guess, the results. I think sometimes we get so caught up in, yes, we achieved that and that was good, and we rest on our laurels and we really forget on how we achieved that success, or maybe we have no idea and it was sheer luck. What are some of the things that you really focus on when you're really just the first couple of days when you start into a leadership position? What recommendations would you give? Because we're hearing the great reshuffle, the great redesign, right? I'm a new leader, I'm stepping into a new role. What advice would you give to that individual on some things that they might want to be doing in the first couple of weeks?
Yep. My advice and my style, and maybe it's not for everybody, but one of the first things I'm going to do is what do I have around me, right? What's the talent around me? I'm gonna get to know people. We're gonna go get a cup of coffee or get some lunch or go grab dinner or a beer or whatever. But I'm gonna get to know who's the influencers, who are the folks that are getting things done in the company. And then you're also gonna get a sense of, does the culture fit with what your vision is for it, right? As you start to talk to people and get a sense of their enthusiasm for the role, are we where we want to be? So I'm going to do a lot of listening, not a lot of talking, not like this thing here today. And then I'm going to start to lay out a plan for folks that they can see and say, hey, here's what I want to do in the first 90 days, right? Mm-hmm. And make it reasonable. You're not going to change the world in 90 days. Bill Gates can, people, Elon Musk can. But in our world, you've got to be able to show a plan and then say, here's what we're going to work through, right? And then make sure that you've got some buy-in, because ultimately, the best leaders in the world that I've ever interacted with and had the pleasure to listen to, no one ever, and I don't couple myself into that category, but you don't do it alone. There's no such thing as, even you want to take the president of the United States, and I don't care what elected official that is, no one runs this country by themselves, right? It's a giant machine. And in the nonprofits, we just don't have the resource machines, but you have to lean on lots of people and lots of volunteers. Sigl is a relatively small company, but we've got an army of volunteers that is quadruple the size of our staff. And that's how things happen. So you've got to be plugged into that too.
Wow.
Love it, Tom. And when did you realize in your career that leverage of relationships? You know, I always read about it until it happened to me, and it was with this guy over here, Kevin. You know, I'll tell you the story afterwards. But when I was like, okay, I get it. You know, this really matters. Do you have any examples for us, or when that really hits you right square in the face?
Yeah. Before I ever went into work for corporate, I owned a small business. So I owned a small audio and video recording studio right out of college. I wanted to be a music producer, and I thought, well, this will be my way to do it. But there's a couple of things that you need. You need more talent than I had, and you need more money than I had. But I realized when my partner and I were doing some presentations to some organizations in town, we weren't always getting the work, even though we were talented enough to get the work and we were priced competitively to get the work, but we didn't know the right people. And you know, you would make a phone call and say, hey, what happened? I know we were, you know, you told us we were competitive on the bid. You know, I know we were right there on the creative because you guys love the creative, that kind of thing. And you would do things on spec, right? And then you'd hear back that, you know, well, this group went with somebody because somebody knew somebody. And you realize, okay, it's about, you know, it is about relationships, right? It is. And in business, in life. So you have to figure out, all right, well, and that doesn't mean that it's not manipulative. It's not trying to take advantage of a personal relationship or what have you. But sometimes it's just that person opening the door. I mean, if you think about how did you get your first job, or how do your friends get their jobs? It's almost always somebody says, hey, I know a great gal. You want to hire her. She's smart. Or, you know, that's how it works. And so it is about relationships across the board. And you know, I say all the time to anybody who comes into my office when we talk about projects, is this going to upset somebody? We don't want to burn any bridges. We live in a circular world. You're going to come back around, and you want to make sure that you treat people the way you want to be treated, because at some point in time, you know, I don't call in favors. I don't think that that's a way to do business. I know some people do. It's not mine. But I think that if you treat people correctly and value them, that comes back to you when you need it to.
Yeah, and that golden rule has always been something that I've held myself to, because it just makes all the sense in the world, and probably why hypocrisy drives me up a wall, right? When it's okay for one to do it and not the other, then no more is it 1 + 1 = 2. It's now 1 + question mark equals question mark, right?
Yeah. Now you're doing that new math, Kevin. Look at
yeah, exactly. Don't get me started on that. I have no idea that 1 is away from 10, which is away from, they did it on the news, and I couldn't help my kids with their homework either at that point. So I'm getting nervous, Tom. I forget the memorization. That's out the window. Now we actually need to understand math, and that gets me sweaty. So
wait till they start telling you about algorithms.
Yeah, great. Yeah, that was the pleasure for math when they started bringing in shapes, and I said, "Oh boy, what are we getting into here?" Math right. Was numbers. Last time I checked. Yes. Something you said that really stuck to me. A couple of things, because they're mottos that I've lived my life by, and it sounds like you've had similar experiences. Like never burn a bridge, right? I'm always talking about never burning a bridge, because you never know what that bridge could lead to. I focus more on building bridges rather than burning them, regardless of whatever opportunity or how it impacted me on a negative basis. I still refuse to burn bridges, because for the other fact, you never know when you're going to need that relationship. You never know when you're going to want to reach out to them with a question, concern, challenge, issue, whatever it might be. But it is all about who you know, whether we like it or not. You mentioned the job opportunities. Really, that was the challenge. What I realized out of college was I didn't really network enough. I didn't do enough internships. I didn't really know anybody. And here my friends and others that I saw getting the jobs were the ones that had parents that were a little bit more connected. Tyler and I met through networking. It was just kind of just happenstance. We met each other, and it was like love at first sight from a bromance perspective, right? But I want to learn kind of what tips are you giving maybe your children, maybe your son that is headed into college, of what you've learned from building these relationships and these networking opportunities, and really, I guess, how to keep them up, because it can be a lot to maintain. But what types of advice would you give to the younger generation that is looking to build out their professional network?
And that's a fantastic question. You know, I think the first thing is you have to make some time for it, right? You have to set aside some time. It doesn't have to be every day, but whether it's once a week or once every couple of weeks, you need to set aside some time to either send an email, send a text, make a phone call to just touch base with people. How are you? What's going on? With no agenda, to just genuinely be concerned and interested in where people are and what they're doing and how their business is. I think that's how I think that's how you build the relationships. I think that's, even if it's when, Kevin, for instance, if people are coming to a golf, that may be the first time I get to see them in a year, but I want to hear how they're doing. How's your business? How's your family? And yes, it's transactional in that you're there to golf that day or what have you, but it's also a chance to just catch up, give each other a hug, and say, hey, I'm glad to hear everything's going okay. Or, hey, I'm sorry to hear about that. If there's a way we can help, please let me know. I think that's how you build your relationships and how you can expand your network. When I interviewed for this position, there was a question about my style, and one of the questions was, Tom, you could be accused of being too nice a guy. How would you respond to that? This is an interview question from the search committee, right? And that was a question, and I said, I wouldn't want anyone to confuse being nice with not having the ability to make difficult decisions and deliver difficult news. I can deliver difficult news. I can make tough decisions, and I'm capable of supporting those decisions and backing it up with my actions. But if at the end of my run, if my epitaph is, here lies a really nice guy, I'm going to be okay with that too. Yeah. So I think, you just try to be authentic with your friends, with your colleagues, and you have different relationships at work than you do outside of work, right? And I recognize that there's always kind of a balance between, how professional are you and what kinds of relationships do you have? But I think if you treat people similarly, I think that's one of those key things that will carry you forward as you build your network. And, your network grows as you grow.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that's awesome to hear you say that. In summary, it grows as you grow, because that going to be more clear to Tyler and I. And we grew a lot during the pandemic. And you talk about professionally and personally, which is really that growth on both fronts. And again, you still have to establish that trust with them. Tyler and I always joke about how long can you have a conversation with somebody that you just met without asking them where they work. It's like first nature for, I don't know why in America, where you work is the first question that we ask people, like it matters, or that dictates how the rest of that conversation is going to go. Because basically what you said, if you have a hidden agenda, it's going to come out through the questions that you ask or you don't ask. So I really, really love that, Tom. You're celebrating we got a few more minutes here, but Al Sigl is celebrating a big year. Can you kind of touch on what's going on this year and what we're celebrating and why it's such a big annual event for Al Sigl?
Yeah, so this is the 60-year anniversary of our founding. As I mentioned earlier, we were founded in 1962 by a gentleman by the name of Justin Vigdor. For Tyler, who is not here in Rochester, Justin Vigdor is one of these iconic Rochester characters. He is a 90-plus-year-old attorney who still goes to work every day dressed in his suit. He may be one of the most brilliant men to ever walk the planet, but he had this idea that you could bring these agencies who are all scattered throughout Rochester in less than ideal space together under one roof. And what he envisioned was this fully accessible facility that would have things that they couldn't have on their own: a gymnasium, warm water therapy pools, a cafeteria, shared common spaces and conference and meeting spaces that obviously, collectively you could get support for, but you couldn't do it if you were an independent agency or out there trying to do it just by yourself. The really key thing about this is that was 1962. We started with one building in 1968. So it took 6 years of planning and fundraising, and we opened in spite of the fact that we were still $200,000 shy on a capital wish for the building. So I've said to people, we didn't open wealthy, and we've been constantly chasing ourselves ever since. But we've gone from that one building to 20 buildings and 650,000 square feet of real estate on 6 campuses. So it's a growth story, and it's really a growth story about the agencies and what they've been doing and what they needed from Al Sigl in response to that. It hasn't necessarily always been about El Siegel's desire to grow, but it's been the fact that the model works more, that, the more services that could come under the umbrellas of each of these agencies allow them to expand and need more space. And so that's really what we've been positioned for. And then we've been extremely fortunate in two respects. One, we're built around the notion of helping people with disabilities and special needs. And the agencies here do fantastic work. And there's a resilience in the client base and in the customers and in the folks that services that inspire everybody to come to work and keep doing it. So that's one piece. And then the other is we're an extremely generous community. Rochester, New York really stands out. I think it leads per capita in United Way gifts throughout the country. So we've been very fortunate to be part of, a community that embraced this idea. Maybe not initially. Initially, I think there was a little bit of a renegade spirit and, a little bit of the not in my backyard kind of thing. But once it opened and people saw what it was and the good work that was happening, we've been very, very fortunate to have continuous support. So 60 years on, we're celebrating that anniversary this year. We've got a number of events planned, but in particular, we've got one planned for later in the summer where we're going to bring a bunch of friends into one of our campuses and just offer an array of games and entertainment and music and fun, family friendly, inclusive, because we've always been about inclusion here at El Sigl. And just a celebration of the success so far, and fingers crossed and prayers that we'll continue to do it for another 60 years.
I have no doubt with they keep selecting great leadership like yourself, and obviously some of the other individuals that I know there, Christine and Deb. You got some great people surrounded around you, and I think it all starts with your leadership. One of the last things that I wanted to kind of just ask as we're wrapping up is, you talk about this 60 years. And Tyler and I we like to think about the future. What would success look like for yourself and for El Sigl in 10 years from now? Where would you like to see El Sigl in 10 years?
Sure. So for me, organizationally, I want to make sure that we've positioned some people for success for transition here 10 years from now. I'd like to think that we've got 2 or 3 people on the team now that could be in leadership or higher level positions than they are currently. I'd like to think that our reach would be extended beyond what it is today. I would love nothing more than to partner with somebody like Pat Smith on an idea like this in other parts of the country. And I think that's a possibility. I think the only limit you have is your vision and the resources to make it happen. So I think, unfortunately, the number of people who are requiring services is climbing. So we need to be positioned for that. But I would love to be able to say this is such a great model. We should replicate it in more places through New York. Certainly, I would love to see it be more of a national model in terms of actually having a footprint in more national places. I don't know if I'll see that on my watch, but I think that's what you try to build for, right? And then, the other part is me personally. I want to make sure that my next 10 years are having an impact with staff and leaving a mark for the work that we've been doing. We've got a lot of growth yet to accomplish. We've still got building to do, but I also want to make sure that when I leave, I've left it in a better place than how I got it, and I got it in really good shape. So can't complain.
And you're making an impact, and it's okay to be nice, Tom. I love that. When I was doing some cold calling up in Rochester, I was in Victor on Main Street Fishers. People would be like, "Dude, you're not from here," and I'm like, "Dude, I had a meals for lunch."
There you go.
Yeah. But Tom, you've been awesome, man. You have an awesome, laid back, just energy to you, man. But we can tell you like to get it done too, man. And I think the last question I always like to ask people, and I think I might have a hint, is what gets you out of bed? You guys make such an impact. The stories you've been telling. What gets Tom O'Connor out of bed nowadays after all the success you've already had? What keeps you going?
I said it earlier. I'm constantly curious. I think I'm nowhere near the best me yet, and I'm still working to try to be that. But it's not about me. It's about what I can do here and what we can accomplish together. I've got so many dedicated people who work with me, and I'm inspired by them each and every day. I would be embarrassed if I couldn't find the energy, enthusiasm to come into this place and do my job. I would be embarrassed. So it's I don't want to be embarrassed. It can't happen.
Love it.
He doesn't have to win, but he hates to lose. That was the other comment that you made earlier. That I see that, right? And that's that nice. All kidding aside, but being nice used to be a weakness, right, or viewed as a weakness in business. And just go back to that interview question. Is that a question that we would ask in an interview today? Probably not, because it would assume that we're not emotionally intelligent or aware. So some of those other new keywords. But Tom, your confidence, knowing you obviously outside of just this podcast, I really just want to say thank you so much for all the great leadership, all the great work that you do, not only at Sigl and for the supporting agencies, but beyond that. I know you're making a difference every day in the lives of your people. And in turn, I think you're having a big impact on the community. So leaders like you, I feel very lucky to have here on the 585.
Well, I'm happy to be asked to participate. You guys are a riot. If you would have told me to bring a coach's whistle, I have one. I would have had mine too. We could have done a trio thing.
Yeah, these whistles have they've been around. Like I said, I just dusted mine off from my backpack that I found at the bottom of the backpack. But Tom, this was a blast. I had a lot of fun, and can't wait for that golf tournament. On June 13th, right?
Absolutely. And Tyler, you ought to figure out a way to come up here and show us if you got game, man.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get busy living or get busy dying, right, Tom?
Right. We'll hold you a spot, and look, Kevin will only film your first 5 shots.
Oh, I really have a driver, man. This is I get off the tee, and I might be putting for eagle, but I don't care about putting.
Well, hey, you fit right in here.
Yeah, drive for show, putt for dough, baby. That's how the motto goes.
You got it,
sir. Awesome.
And guess what? In our tournament, there's food and drinks and everything on almost every hole, so you just can't go wrong.
No. There you go, man. I'm all about it, Tom. I'll get with Kevin on that and see what we can work out.
All right.